for the recovery, and it's also a common work of the Center of Economic Strategy and Consultation and NGO Technologies of Progress. All project participants are the members of the RISE Coalition, and we are very much thankful to the European Union for the fact that we can do what we are doing, and we can trace what has happened in the sphere of recovery and rebuilding. My name is Maria Rybko. I am the Deputy Head of the Center for the Economic Strategy. I will be acting as the moderator today. So, if you have any questions, please keep them in Q&A. It's better than in chat. Then the participants can choose some questions and reply immediately or in writing. So what we would like to do today, first of all, Max Nefedov will tell us what is the update on the BRP portal. This portal is one of the main parts of the project where we hope that the citizens of Ukraine, NGOs, international organizations, journalists, everybody who is interested in the recovery and rebuilding would be able to monitor, to see the civil monitoring in the real-time mode. And this project right now is in the really good process of development. So Max will update us on the news. Then we will also talk about the news about rebuilding and recovery, what has happened in December. Alexander Bukli will tell us about it, about the regulatory network, about financing, how much money was spent, which legislative acts were adopted or not adopted. Then Volodymyr Landa, our senior economist, will tell us how he has analyzed the data for all the procurement related to construction. Very interesting graphs. I was really enthusiastic when I looked at that. And the last block of today's event, this is the block that is devoted to using construction waste during recovery, and Irina Kose, who is representing the Institute of Strategic Consultation, has prepared materials for this special topic. And we have also asked Roman Puchko, Rethink NGO, and Mykola Boyka, First Deputy Chief of Kyiv Oblast Military Administration. So I hope that everybody is finally gathered. Yes, I think everybody's here, and we can start. Once again, many thanks who have joined us, many thanks to donors, many thanks to colleagues who have worked. Max, the floor is yours. So please tell us what is the news, what is the update regarding the portal. Dear colleagues, good evening, good afternoon. Very happy to welcome you. It's dark, you don't see me, but yeah, it's me, I do exist. Actually, I wanted to tell you a few words. I will not be showing you anything because everybody can join brp.org.ua and check it out for yourself, what we have been working on during the New Year holidays, together with Sneaks Delivery, who is our partner regarding this development. The work never stops, and over this time, we have put into production several blocks that could be of interest to you. First of all, these are the documents, some technical information related to the project that for many of the projects already does exist. And naturally, you can look at it, you can analyze it, download it. We can really download it in a very convenient format. Also, we see that our colleagues from the state structures, they also continue to work over these holidays, and starting from the 18th of December, when we launched for the first time and presented the portal, we see that more than 130 active projects are there. And the overall number is actually now more than 250 for the time being. So it's just one of the other signs that the process of recovery is moving actively. It's not stalled. It's not like happening somewhere in the vacuum. That means, from the one hand, that there is a good reason for some significant optimism. I'm not even now talking about this dreamed recovery, when we can really take Russia's money, when we can expect to have tens and hundreds of billions of dollars. But in any case, recovery is in progress all over Ukraine. Secondly, that's a big challenge for our project and for our partners and for all those colleagues who we hope can join us in the framework of the competitions for the grants that we are also part of. And I would like to remind you, please do submit your proposals. It's very interesting, it's very useful for the country. And basically speaking, as I'm joking in Facebook, that's the work that is being paid, and you're doing it really well. These hundreds of projects, definitely not all of them are of the ideal quality. Some maybe are not that necessary, and for many of them, there would be some risks for the implementation, including the corruption risks. Of course, we should trace that all, and we should hope that the state will do everything for us. We know this is not the case in this country. The second story, which I wanted to remind you about, it's about the possibility for civil organizations. Already on the portal, we have the section for NGOs, and we have the first NGO, Kharkiv Anti-Corruption Center, who is acting as a pioneer, investigating all possible bugs and inconveniences, problems for the design, etc., that maybe we have not thought about. And we expect that in the near future, when the first grant selection is over, there will be many more of such NGOs. We have, these people have started work related to monitoring. All of this functionality is moving parallel in addition to the other work which we are doing. These are the main things that took place. I will not talk about UI UX improvements. I will not talk about it. That's an eternal, never-ending story that takes from morning till evening to make it work. I will just tell you an announcement that what we're expecting in the near future, we will see the functionality of comments and complaints. That's very logical. If we have people who are going to work, then we should have the possibility for discussion and complaining. There will be also a functionality of uploading photographs and videos. If we're talking about monitoring, then definitely it's better to see once how this object looks like versus the advertised picture, rather than to hear it for many times. This is something that we should expect in the next few weeks. Many thanks to you. And once again, let me remind you that we will be very helpful for the feedback, for the comments, criticism, proposals. Please do leave them at the website. Also, do write to us using the feedback form by email, or if it's more convenient, you can leave comments on my Facebook page, Big Recovery Portal, anywhere. Any of our colleagues, we will hope that we will be able to respond to all of your remarks. Many thanks, Max, for connecting. Yes, definitely, whoever is interested, please stop by at our portal, see how you can contribute, or if you want to cooperate us as sub-grantor, please submit your proposal, your application. If you have any questions related to sub-grants regarding the financing that the project can propose to you as a contributor to the portal, to the one who will be doing the monitoring of recovery, please leave your questions in the Q&A, and we will try to reply to them. Also, immediately, I would like to respond to a question in chat. Yes, of course, we will give the word to Andriy. Slavka is preparing for you a link and connection. Also taking this opportunity, you see some announcements of our events. If you would like to participate in any of our events, if you have anything to say very specific, please do write to us, either at the address of the portal or anywhere else. Whichever is convenient for you, we get to know each other, and we'll be happy to cooperate. Okay, let us now come back to the presentation of monitoring what happened in December. The monitoring itself as a PDF file will be placed on all websites of our organizations. I hope that colleagues will also place it in chat. And Facebook and Big Recovery Portal, it will be placed as well. And this file will be having more information versus the information that will be right now voiced loudly. So, Alexandra, please tell us what has happened in December. Before we move to the presentation itself, I wanted to, from my side, also to say, it's what Maria has mentioned, until tomorrow, it's still possible to ask questions about sub-grants, and we will reply to them. This will be most effective. I've also put into the chat the link to the sub-grants because we have very much a quick pace, the analysis of recovery and the usage of the construction ways. What concerns the regulatory framework, I don't think we have had any significant updates in the legislation after our last monitoring, but the area of the destroyed housing was updated. It's important, it's not written in this resolution that we're talking about any limitation of funds for the destroyed housing. So I understand, reading this resolution, that we're talking about decrease of calculation of compensation. Fewer square meters will be repaid. I think this is done because we are lacking financing, so people who are waiting, they can wait. So the resolution of the Committee of Ministers limits the area of destroyed housing, which is taken into account in the amount of compensation. No more than 150 square meters for an apartment and not more than 200 square meters for the house. We've also seen what is done in other spheres, and it looks like today the recovery and receipt of the compensation costs can be really looked at as an additional fringe benefit for the citizens. So our parliamentaries should take special changes to the tax code of Ukraine to exclude the corresponding payment for additional benefits, which are the basis for taxation of the income of individuals. We had similar changes introduced for 579 programs, which is helping with this special loans. So far, the work on the draft law on reconstruction is not yet finished, which was worked on by the working group created by the Ministry of Reconstruction. So it's not yet completed. In particular, according to this draft law, it is proposed to make DREAM mandatory for restoration and reconstruction of projects. As a result, DREAM will continue to operate in an experimental mode. Only the Kiev region has started all the projects, which others have only a limited number. I know that various ministries are talking about it, and there are various ideas discussed what should be in that draft law. Maybe it can be expanded in this from this original version to get a higher expectation. What concerns the health facilities, from what we have seen, the information, unfortunately, in the aggregated information, we don't see a special separate information on healthcare facilities. So we can say today that compared to the previous monitoring, by 23, the number of damaged medical facilities because Russia continues the shelling. And of course, we have an increase by 10 objects were fully restored. So the project of recovery continued. What concerns the education, we see that at this moment, 3,428 educational institutions were damaged and 365 were completely destroyed, but 500 establishments were restored. DREAM, it's not all, but the majority of the projects are there. In addition, in comparison with the previous monitoring inventory, we see additional 135 projects been added. We can see that 48.8 of the projects are in the implementation stage. Not all projects that are already on DREAM, they have the need for financing. This is something that was said before. that on DREAM there will be projects, not only the projects that would need financing, but also what will be sent into the fund of liquidation of armed aggression. And these projects are coming in there in order that we find the financing. Exactly on this map, we have added the DREAM elements, and we can see that Kiev region is one of the leaders. That means that they have submitted all projects. And we really want to call on NGOs who are present in the region, also the communities who are present here on this call, so that you would ask your communities to send information to DREAM. That improves reporting, accountability, so we could also engage communities. It's very important to that, with more trust on behalf of donors to us, because they would see what is going on. With this, the feeling of the project varies greatly by community. Only 38% of projects have an implementation plan, and 50 indicate certain indicators for the implementation of the project. At the same time, a lot of projects in general don't have even 50% of the necessary information. Within 1 month, we especially did it in the Kharkiv region. If we talk about financing, this was construction of roads. In the Kiev region, we see a lot of projects. We see that there are some changes in also related to the transport in the Kharkiv region, but it's mostly about housing. When we talk about the financing in 2023, it's been done especially with the help of the Fund for Liquidation of the Consequences of the Armed Aggression in 23. It should be, according to the plan, 1.8 billion hryvnia. 3 meetings of an interdepartmental working group took place. In fact, competition of projects submitted by communities out of competition allocation of funds for urgent reconstruction and restoration projects was implemented by the Restoration Agency. There was some limited financing, and the activity of the government was quite low. Also, as I said, using this liquidation fund, we have allocated a number of funds out of the competition, 8.5 billion for the construction of a main water pipeline. I would like to let you know what is happening with the pipeline, and you can see the presentation. 3.3 billion hryvnia was sent for the restoration of 5 settlements that were destroyed by the Russian troops. That is done by the Agency for Restoration, and 3.5 billion hryvnia was allocated for the restoration of 46 objects in 9 regions. New objects, new buildings. Of course, there is the program which is called e-restoration. It's important to mention that those funds, it's the communities that have submitted applications and received financing, and those oblast administrations who have won financing from the liquidation fund for the construction, for the recovery of certain objects, who have not spent that by end of the year, they should have returned this money to the state budget. So I have not seen any information. It's an open question for me, but when we talk later about it, possibly maybe we can also reflect it. The question remains open. What will be next? These projects were approved. Would this money return to this state funds, or they will be redistributed? I don't have the answer yet. I think it would be more logical to have the first one. When we talk about e-restoration, let me remind you that this is the program for the compensation of the destroyed or lost housing. 35,000 Ukrainians received funds for urgent and capital repairs. It's over 3 billion hryvnia. And 95 families already purchased new housing using certificates. And sometimes it's private homes. We had more than 8,674 applications. and we used 629 certificates of the reserved funds. There are commissions who are checking this, whether to which extent the housing is destroyed. And on the 23rd of December, they made a decision about funding for providing compensation for destroyed real estate objects increased from 2.5 to 5.8 billion hryvnia. If we talk about financing of recovery in 2024, partially this will be done from the reserve fund. 42 billion are foreseen for that. It's important from that side. The urgent recovery, it's all will be financed from the reserve funds. The second one is remaining funds from the fund for the liquidation of the consequences of the armed aggression. Approximately 23 billion will be used. This is the balance. So factually, it is less than last year, but it's not that little because it's still 23 billion. The funds from international donors, we said it in our previous meetings, more than 12 billion hryvnia already in the budget. But the actual amount will depend on the pace of project implementation. So the need does exist in increasing capacity of communities. So it's working with the communities approving recovery plan and programs. So we suggest regional communities to join in and to support development of plans and cooperation with donors. Thank you. I'm finishing at this today. Many thanks, Alexandra. It's really super that we have this issue with the housing, but I really hope that this project will speed up and we will be able to see a more optimistic data, more significant results. I would like now to pass the floor to my colleague who have analyzed this procurement in the construction over 2023, how this procurement took place, who was doing this. And this is not only recovery and rebuilding, it's all recovery because we can't really separate this. But the overall trends are seen and seen quite nicely. Please, Vladimir, the floor is yours. Thank you, Maria. Yes. We say analysis of reconstruction purchases. That's not a special code. We think that we have to probably implement it, maybe a special market to be introduced. We don't have that yet. So we are analyzing all the procurement that are done in the category of reconstruction and current repairs. Some 5% of the number of all national procurement. And before we jump into the analysis of all this data, I can tell you that in 2023, we had 883,000 procurements were announced. Out of them, 170 rounds were completed for the total amount of 283 billion hryvnia. And this is not yet the full amount because the 12,000 procurement don't yet had the current amount of the completed purchases, and there is some information that is classified. So the overall amount, we can for sure say that it exceeds 300 billion hryvnia. The biggest procurement has been done with the usage of the electronic system. This was 16%, 27,000. The most common procurement procedures are there. Basic procurement without the use of an electronic system, it's 142,000. That's 82% from the number of procurements, which provided for 39% of the cost of procurement. And more procurement was done through the open tender procedure. This was 14% of the overall construction procurement, but they were responsible for 59% of the cost of purchases. There are other 6 procedures accounted for only 4% in number and 2% of the value of procurement. And the main conclusions that we can make, first of all, construction is one of the most common categories. The tender was announced every 3 minutes, and this process was on even in on weekends, holidays, even on the 1st of January. A small number of large purchases provide a significant part of their amount. Purchases worth more than 100 million hryvnia make up less than 0.2% of the total number of procurement, while they account for 46% of the total value. Another conclusion is the all leading companies in terms of purchase amounts specialize in road and bridge construction. It's a very clear specialization. Regarding the organizers of the tenders, the biggest in terms of value are the procurement of the Agency for Restoration and its structural subdivisions. And the last thing that we will talk about would be the abnormally high number of purchases in the amount of 180 up to 200,000 hryvnia. Why this is happening, we will shortly talk about. Let's start from the top organizers. Here with the green, we have marked organizers that pertain to the restoration agencies. So we can see that the top organizers, it's the regional services for the development of infrastructure and recovery, and they are the main organizers. Apart from that, there are a number of departments who are responsible for road construction and housing and utilities of the big oblast administrations. Ukrgidroenergo. The top winners, we can see that the absolute, as we said before, it's the road construction companies and bridges. And since these companies, you can see that what is their share in the total value. So it's a top 10 share in all procurement, provide for in procurement it's 29%, and top 10 winners are accounted for 32% of all procurement. It's slightly higher percentage because if we're building a big road, we don't have a huge list of companies that can physically build such things. So roads and water pipelines have become the biggest orders. We can see from the top 10 building concert, biggest orders, it was the Agency for Restoration. Sometimes we do know whether it's water pipeline or road. Sometimes the details are not made public. The biggest tender that took place without the participation of the Agency of Recovery was the tender for the keeping and current repairs of roads in Lviv Oblast. What concerns the timeline of the procurement, we can see that in the second half a year, it's much more. In the first half a year, this process is not that quick and dynamic. That includes both to the Agency of Restoration as well as other organizers. Moreover, the Agency Recovery peak came at December because every fifth order was announced exactly in December. What concerns the timeline, the normal procedures, we have the procedure that require conducting through the electronic system, and this is not very relevant for the outside of electronic system. It's the majority of purchases was done in the adequate terms. Most of it took place throughout 40 days. the procurement that takes place over 50, 60 days, there is a question that is asked. There was one procurement that lasted 280 days. This was for 8,000 hryvnia. What else is important? The number of participants, it's the problem. It's quite big because the number of participants leaves much to be desired, although we did have a building procurement for 21. This was the exception, but normally it's less than 2 participants. So with the agency of restoration, it's 1.7 participants, and others even less than 1.1 participants. More relevant would be the participation of 78%. It's the other organizers. In the same way, this tendency continues for the bigger number of participants. If we take, for instance, for 5 or more participants, then we would see that it's more than 8% for the agency of restoration, others less than 1%. A little bit more statistics in the right column. I will not stand for too long on some separate ones, but just want to mention that the procedures where we have 10 or more participants, they accounted for only 79 million hryvnia of tenders. This is not even less than 0.1%. And another subject which I wanted to touch upon, it's the threshold and below threshold purchases. Up to 200,000 hryvnia can be done without the usage of electronic system, same as works up to 1.5 million hryvnia. And we have certain peaks of certain procurement from 190 to 200,000 hryvnia. We had such procurements, some 16,000. This is like 9% of all the procurement took place in this very narrow interval from 190 to 200. More than half of them took place in the interval of 199 to 200,000 hryvnia. That means that the amount of tender in the majority of them was formed knowing that you don't need to bring it to bring this into the system. With this red dot, we have shown you how much this is done by the agency of restoration. We can see that it's not such a big problem, although it is really seen on the right graph when we talk about the threshold 1.5 million hryvnia. So here we see certain bigger number of requests, and as you can see, the scale of the problem is not so huge like for the problems from 200,000 hryvnia, and some additional cross sections. If somebody is interested, you can separately look at it and we can explain more about it. These are the biggest organizers of the procurement, the biggest winners. From the good thing, we don't see any problems here because the biggest organizers, it's the utility companies of Kiev. Out of the winners, there are some also managing companies from the other regions. They have a big number of concluded agreements. The amount of agreements are quite adequate. These are dozens of millions of hryvnia, and most common tender is the tender for renovation of elevators, and elevator service has more than 1,300 of such tenders. We are talking about the procurers who have biggest number of complaints, and which organizers conducted the biggest number of procurement with the high lengths. In Ukraine, we can see that 75% is done with the length, that time frame that is exceeding our expectation. I would like to say a few words about journalist investigations. We can see that there are a lot of sometimes dirty campaigns. If we look at the journalist investigations that were made public over the last months, we have mentioned top 5 media by number of reconstruction investigations. This was investigation 4, Bihus, then UA Community and Ukrainian Pravda. On the right, you see the main news from this media. Apart from that, it's some misusage during procurement. This media are also concentrating that some bodies have looked at this, paid attention to it, and concentrating how the state bodies are working with the ones who are uncovering corruption, whistleblowers, and what is necessary to prevent such kind of things in the future. And definitely procurement for the recovery is one of the most important things that should be of interest to journalists. Definitely, like in the monitoring that we have conducted, it's not easy to evaluate whether it makes sense to allocate 10 or 20 million hryvnia. So journalists are concentrating on those projects that they can really convince, talking to organizers or to some high officials. At this, I would like to stop, and I'm passing the floor to colleagues. Many thanks, Volodymyr. Kiev, Desnyansky district, what are you doing there? 2,000 tractors. I don't think people will have their hand aching signing this. And I would like now to go to a special topic, which is of very big interest, as it was clarified to many, how to use the construction waste for the reconstruction. Because the houses are destroyed, can we somehow spare the effort in order not to bring it to polygons, but rather to recycle it and to use it for the reconstruction? Irina will talk more about what she has cleared. Irina is the scientific investigator from the Institute of Consultation and Research, and we would like to hear the colleagues who are really knowledgeable about such a subject. Thanks to everyone. Welcome. I hope that my presentation will be a push for the discussion. Let us start how it is regulated to use construction waste in Ukraine. We have 2 main legislative acts. It's a relatively fresh law about management of waste, which became effective in July 2023. This is the framework law. It regulates how to use construction waste in general, including the construction waste from construction and from damages. The law says that this construction waste must be ready for reuse and recycling, and the municipalities must achieve the target indicators. At least 10% of the mass of household waste is recycled by 2025. In addition to that, before this law was effective, all were guided by the resolution 1073, the procedure for the management of destruction waste. It actually has even a longer name. In this particular resolution, it's possible to see the classification and accounting of waste, what are the requirements for their handling, storage and reuse, temporary storage of waste in designated places, if there are any, or they should use landfills immediately, and which components are there, what is a part of the waste from destruction, as well as ways of reusing waste in construction and building materials industry. So what is happening in Ukraine from what we see? First of all, before the full-scale aggression of Russia, part of the construction waste was sent to a processing plant in Belarus. That is, in Ukraine, we don't have such processing companies. The rest was accumulated on polygons, and we can see that these polygons, which are landfills, and with that amount of damages that we see from Russia, the majority of this waste is accumulated in landfills. This is very dangerous because in this we have some unsafe materials that have asbestos, because we know that the level of using roofing material in private sector can reach 60–70%. Also, the municipal buildings have a high content of asbestos materials. So it's important not only to bring them to landfills, but rather to make sorting of this waste. Also, we have seen that a lot of communities are resolving this independently. That's also regulated by the legislation, and that means that the local self-governments should define these places for centralized recycling, but how this should be done and which funds, I did not see this in the news. If we compare with what is happening in Ukraine with the world experience in Ukraine, as I said, in majority cases, the waste is accumulated in landfills, while in the United States, they are processed. Why? Because it's very cheap in Ukraine to just simply bury the waste. I have found 30 up to 150 hryvnia per square meter, depending on the place of the landfill. And if we were to compare this with the US and the EU, where they have 4 to sometimes 150 euro for 1 ton, so there are no enough stimuli in Ukraine to process those waste. The mass media also wrote, and I know that the representative of the Kiev Oblast will talk in more detail about it. In Kiev Oblast, they have allocated 50 landfills for construction waste. And now this waste is just mostly brought to landfills. And again, looking at the world experience, in some countries, such construction landfills are prohibited to begin with. We have some more examples, like for instance, in Austin, Texas, the United States, there is a recycling of at least half of the construction waste. And you can see also a very nice picture of this hill. This is the park in Warsaw. These are artificial hills. They were built from rubble and construction debris after the Second World War, and the channel of the Vistula River near the Warsaw-Gdansk railway station was strengthened using such construction waste. So it's also one of the ways to really use that. What is happening in Ukraine? You can see this materials, how the names of the materials. We can see that some projects are being implemented. Like for instance, we have a project of the Israeli company, which is called Green Mix. There are some projects for reprocessing in Mykolaiv, in Kiev Oblast. Japanese companies working in the Kharkiv region. So some pilot projects are already there that causes optimism, but I really would wish to see more of such examples and more systematic work. What concerns and what we have in Ukraine, we already have companies engaged in processing systematically, exactly the construction waste, the waste. You can see the types of materials. There are companies that work with metals, concrete, bricks. Some are able to make disposal of mercury-containing waste. They also need to be sorted and pre-processed separately. And separately, we have allocated companies who produce processing equipment to treat waste in Ukraine. And finally, my last slide. It's what we recommend to do and what needs to be changed in terms of regulation and practice. First of all, as I already said, It's important to sort hazardous materials such as asbestos contained in a slate roof, asbestos containing thermal insulation, rather than put them into the landfills. We have to make research of this construction waste. We don't need to send it abroad to France. Ukraine does have laboratories that can analyze the content of the hazardous substances in the construction waste, so it has to be done here. One of such big problems is that in Ukraine, for the time being, we don't have clear statistics on how we analyze, how we process construction waste. We do have overall statistics regarding waste, but exactly the construction waste and recovery rate of construction and demolition waste, we simply don't have that. We don't have such statistics in Ukraine. If we were to compare it with the data in the EU, this share in the US, the recovery rate of construction and demolition waste in the European Union was already in 2018 was 88%. And one more aspect, we have to pay attention to specific waste resulting from shelling of the former metallurgical companies. There are certain nuances in terms of how hazardous are these wastes and what needs to be processed and how they should be sorted. Thank you for your attention. That's all from my side. Thank you, Irina. 88% of processing of the construction and demolition waste. That's really inspiring. I don't know. It's unbelievable that they can really process it for such a long range and use it for very useful things. Mr. Andrei is with us, but let me pass the floor first of all to Mykola Boyka, the deputy head of the Kyiv military administration. They are the leader in submitting projects for DREAM. Many thanks for that. That's a beautiful result. And the more results we have, that would be better. Please tell me how recovery takes place with you, because the Kyiv region, which was significantly captured and suffered, but then liberated, and this recovery and rebuilding was quite realistic. How are you rebuilding? How you are recovering? How are you using construction waste? Many thanks for such warm words about the Kyiv region. In reality, I wanted to say thank you to all who are on this call and for the possibilities that you give us for the development of our region. We are guided in our work and always pay attention to those possibilities that show up, and we make sure that these possibilities could be implemented and a good work would be done. Kyiv Oblast is not only in DREAM, we are also leaders in terms of the number of recovered objects and the possibilities that we have in the region. We are fruitfully cooperating with international partners who are helping us. We are engaged in almost all state programs that are there on the territory of Ukraine. That's e-restoration. We don't have a bad indicator. I think it's at the level of 90%. It's also United 24. We have the program, and you know, it's run by the president. When we are renovating 18 multi-story buildings, 3 more objects of the social infrastructure are engaged. That's the liquidation fund where 97 objects are restored, mostly high-rise buildings as well as the social objects. We have the Oblast program, which we are 93 buildings in the Kyiv Oblast. We are also renovating a lot of apartments in Irpin. So in our recovery, we are trying to pay all attention to all possibilities that are there in Ukraine, and to use them to make sure we can render assistance to our citizens. So we are fixing 28.6 damaged or destroyed objects. And unfortunately, this number is permanently increasing. We know that the shelling continues, Shaheds, missiles, and the rest. So as at today, it's 28,000 objects, and we have 16.5 thousand are actually recovered. The process of recovery continues permanently in all communities without any exceptions. I can remind you that 52 communities have been suffering Okay, we paid most of the attention, the priority attention. If you remember, Kiev was for some time without gas, water, electricity. So our first priority in April, May 2022, this was the restoration of the priority needs, water supplies, gas, electricity, as well as connection between settlements. We saw those bridges that were made within 2-3 weeks in order to make sure we can make people move. Then we moved to rapid restoration, installing windows, repairing roofs with some small resource we could cover as many people as possible. Now we have moved to a stage of capital repairs. A lot of objects are built from scratch. A lot of objects are being repaired in the region. We have engaged all possible resources. The third stage, we also foresee that we are uh, renewing old to the new, but we understand that renovation and modernization of the region, it's another significant assignment in the post-war period. So we really want that our region with all European standards, European vision, and we have for this process, we need to really get fruitfully prepared, work on the solutions, work on the grounds that we will use in the future. That's where I'm inviting all international partners to engage and to help us in this, because we don't have that much of experience. We learn on the go from the experience that we're getting. We are trying to get this through our own territories. What concerns the process of recovery, we are trying so much that this process of recovery would be transparent. You know that the head of the Kiev Oblast administration is permanently doing meetings at the objects, and everybody's invited, including NGOs, civil society, parliamentaries, journalists, anyone who can ask questions. We are responding to all referrals that we receive. We are making this working meetings, and that takes place every 2 weeks for each of these directions of recovery. In our activity, we are guided exclusively by the transparency and accountability of all the processes. To us, the system of DREAM is really a good assistance to us. We want to really popularize that every object would be not without attention. We're ready to show it, that everybody would have the possibility to ask this or that question and to sort it out. What concerns the household waste, yes, the previous speaker mentioned 1073 resolution. When we do the dismantling, a lot of objects that require dismantling, it's actually more than 10,000 buildings. It's high-rise buildings that are destroyed, including 51 educational institutions and mostly the private sector. The households, part of these objects is already dismantled, and some of it is dismantled right now. We have international funds, UNDP, with the support of the of the Japanese government. We had in 5 projects, some objects were dismantled with the state funds, some self-governance bodies, some at the expense of international funds. So it's like a symbiosis to give us the assistance. Also, we are guided by the resolution 1073. We brought all of this to 32 landfills where we have this construction waste. We believe it's 300,000 tons. What we are planning to do with it? You know that Kiev is a pilot project. The Japanese government, as well as the government organization, JICA, gave an assistance to Ukraine in terms of the equipment for the processing of construction waste. This process lasted in 2023. It actually continues now. We have received most of the machinery for the processing of waste. These are the 3 lines that can process waste in any place, we have organized funds from the oblast budget for the start of such works, for the improvement of this process. We have put it on balance in our oblasts. We have already started the state company because 300,000 tons is not that big compared to Kharkiv, Kherson, Donetsk, Luhansk regions. So we want to get that experience for the production of waste to make it correctly and high quality. So this project has to be structured, has to be logical, has to be legal, and has to be transparent, and most importantly, correctly fine-tuned. So we would separate the unsafe elements, so we could separate the household waste and could use it for the further works, be it 1 year or for the production of new objects. So this would be not 10%, I think it should be more than 50% as a minimum. But again, this process is not new. Whatever was dismantled or is being dismantled, it's not sorted on the spot. It's just brought as bulk to these landfills. Of course, this is very unsafe, but I think that in spring, Kyiv will show how it should be, and all these 32 landfills we are planning to clean throughout 2024. In parallel, creating the state-owned company that will, with the assistance of this equipment that we received from the Japanese government, so we could give this assistance to other regions anywhere where this will be needed, where it will require this attention. So if briefly that's it, ready for the questions, ready to answer. Many thanks, Mykola. I have written this request, if you don't mind, to pass it over to Kharkiv and Sumy, and you don't mind passing this machinery and equipment to Kharkiv and Sumy. Okay, let us listen to other speakers. I can see that in Q&A we already have some questions in chat and 2 questions in Q&A. I would like to pass the floor to Roman Pochko, Rethink co-owner. And I know, Roman, your NGO is doing and somehow is connected to this waste treatment and waste processing. Yes, is engaged from the point of view that we are doing to make sure we do the green recovery. We would need to target these concepts from the point of view of the materials and from the point of view of the design. When I say about the design, it's when some new quarters are created. It's interesting to see how we are planning, what we're using, and what is the use for this particular building for how many years from the point of view of the materials. It's also the waste from destruction. It's 10-12 million tons we evaluated, but this figure is growing every day. This topic is very new. I can have a lot of reflection to what Irina was saying, to Mr. Mykola. I just don't know what to really start from, because I can speak hours about this. Those names, you can take them out because everything was like failing. From the other hand, there are a lot of possibilities, and Mr. Mykola is right that the Kyiv region received quite a good equipment. It's high quality from the point of view of bringing down the size of the fraction of this rubble. But the other big problem, this waste was not sorted on the ground, and there was no, in terms of the unsafe materials, hazardous materials, like for instance asbestos. I mean, if it's just a roofing material and it's standing on the roof and you don't touch it, but if it's a damage, destruction, if it was trashed, crashed, it's a problem then. Then it starts to evaporate unsafe components into the air. And the first measure that needs to be done when you are coming over to such a site, you actually have to work in respirators to conduct some research whether you have some evaporation of the unsafe materials, and only then you can come to a certain processing. Definitely. Of course, I can come back a little bit and talk about the resolution itself, because it's absolutely beautiful optimism from the point of view that this temporary sites, that they should cease their existence throughout the year after the martial law is over, which I absolutely support. But I'm also being realistic how this can happen. So I also said about stimulation from the point of view that our landfill is very cheap, and this is really true. But this wording is in the end of the cycle. It's when we talk about that something is already a rubble, a waste, it has to be brought somewhere. So take the problem out of my shoulders, and it's cheap in Ukraine. But there is also the possibility that you can do some more things. This secondary materials, they're not in any way competitive with the construction materials, with the primary materials in construction. And therefore we have this low price for the usage of natural resources, which means that we have quite low rents for extraction of rubble or sand. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have that much time. I mean, I see that your format is quite quick. So we do have a lot of problems. What concerns the 88%, it's absolutely realistic figure, and those components which are not processed and you can't use them, like for instance the polystyrol or some other toxic components, they're quite light. It's 90% very realistic. In the Netherlands, in Germany, it's 100%. If it's done as usage for road construction, but in the Netherlands, it's even new construction. What else I wanted to say? Basically, I see the prospects to make sure we can process this waste only locally, because logistics kills the economic sense to bring it somewhere. As at now, this is what is lying around. It can be processed to use for the simply for the road construction, because really to significantly process it, it's a very technological process, and we need a very high quality material to begin with. It will not simply work. But what else I wanted to emphasize is that is what Mr. Mikola said about dismantling, and that a lot of objects do require it. It's exactly that second part of the story, that we have to be very much careful if we want this green recovery. If we don't want the green recovery, then of course you can take out everything and build new as much as you wanted. But if you want really green recovery, then we need to stimulate the competitiveness of the secondary materials in order not to overdo it. And so we would not have those who are trying to follow the regulatory norms, and people would start dismantling everything that is old. It was a webinar last week, how to work with the existing, anything that you will build on the, instead of like some building of 70s, 80s, everything will be much less ecological from the point of view of emissions than to work with the existing. So those structures who are not in emergency, they should be reused. And you shouldn't really radically, without thinking, dismantle them. Yes, with this process, you can sort these precious components and you can really divide the flows of materials, but processing of 100%, it's much better than can be used to. I think I should stop because I can talk hours. If there are any specific questions, please go ahead. Thank you, Roman. Very interesting and very cool plan. I really loved it as an economist. And that's an illustration how the economy is working, the stimulus for the usage of the secondary materials and increasing its rates for processing and also increasing the rates for sand. And yeah, that's very much comprehensive. Nothing is easy, nothing is simple. Everything is so connected in the economy. All simple solutions are quite complicated. Also taking this role of the moderator, actually, I want to ask the first question. I will ask about journalists' investigation, because you said something didn't go the right way. Just 1 minute. So what exactly wasn't right? Because in the media, we see victories, we don't see failures about such things. I wouldn't want to say that it's all failures. Of course, if something didn't work out with someone, then maybe it will be successful next year or with others. Let me rephrase. What are the lessons learned very quickly? The lessons learned is that these quick announcements of readiness to invest into a factory, sometimes they don't turn into the investment into the factory when you start to sort the situation in a more detailed way. I actually don't want to name anyone. This will not be correct because everybody who's mentioned here, that they would should to talk on behalf of themselves. I wouldn't want to make some information public. And like, for instance, one project in the Kiev Oblast, when the idea was good, but as I said, for the high technology processing of construction waste, the new construction materials, it's necessary to, it's important not to have a lot of rubbish in the incoming fraction. That's why in the production of some construction materials that they plan to do out of the construction waste, it simply don't work out. But yeah, I mean, this can be used. Thank you, Roman. Our next speaker is Andriy Skripnik, is the Ukrainian Institute of Ukrainian Materials and Products. He is, Andriy, please tell us about the problems of the Institute in the sphere of recycling. What is happening with you? I would like to ask you in the framework of 4 minutes, just to say within 4 minutes, so we can have another 15 minutes for Q&A. Good. I will not show the presentation. I will just say a few words. The problems for processing of destruction is very complicated. The previous speaker already mentioned about it, and the need for the deep sorting and making it coming down to some small fractions, checking for some toxic pollution, some other types of pollution, and the fact that these construction materials produced out of the destruction waste will be definitely more expensive than the materials from the natural materials, and they will have lower consumer characteristics. But there are other ways in order to get rid of such huge waste from destruction is simply not there. Our institute has a lot of research, a lot of understanding for such kind of destructions as concrete, gas concrete, bricks. It's mostly what is constituting the most of the waste, because these are wall materials, this is the foundation, the walls. At the moment in Ukraine, we don't have comprehensive scientific research that would allow at a high quality level to produce such materials, and we don't have the legislative network to use them in construction. To make sure we can formulate this legislative framework, we would need some good comprehensive research of the raw materials, because we understand that the ceramic bricks, it's of different years production. There will be various indicators of frost resistance, strength, so a huge range for each type of building materials. It's important to analyze all of this to come up to some average indicators, then to define the contents of the various construction materials, the technologies for production, and then we can say that, for instance, in construction, we can use this or that product for this or that purpose, or during construction of certain building materials with a certain percentage, you can add some waste from destruction. Nobody can now say how much of the destruction waste can be added to concrete products. It's not simply prescribed at the moment. So our institute for 1 year is Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Infrastructure, all the conferences, all the scientific research for the materials. Everywhere this question is raised. And it's important to mention that, first of all, it's important to have the financing. Then we would need 5 or 12 months to make 9-12 months to develop technologies, to develop warehouses for these construction materials, and to develop standards in their production. And then it will all be possible with some other resolution apart from 1073 to foresee that, for instance, in the recovery projects, a certain percentage could be from recycling. At the moment, we can't say this percentage because we don't have research to prove that. So therefore, we are in progress of searching financing. Who is interested, we have some already results. Please come over to the Institute. I can really tell you about it, and I'm really ready to cooperate. Actually, very interesting. Please, could you share your presentation with us? Please, could you forward it by email? We are very much interested to look it up, and maybe in the future, something from this story we can do together with you. Let me come to Q&A. Let me first ask questions which are in Q&A, because I asked everybody to begin with to ask your questions in Q&A, because they have written their questions in the Q&A section. The first question is to Irina, to Mykola. Do we have any data whether it is realistic? We have the order of is this only a declarative character, or we do have the order of handling the waste from destruction? Irina or Mykola, maybe Mykola as a practitioner. Yes, I can tell you once again, we are guided by the resolution 1073. We're taking out this into 32 landfills, but we are getting ready to fulfill this resolution. We have the machinery, we have the vision of this project, of this process. I hope that in March I will bring this up and I will show to everyone how it's happening in the Kiev region. I think everything will work out in this respect. But now the process is taking some time. Irina, you have the same opinion? Yes, at the moment it's declarative. The Kiev Oblast is really being the leader, showing example. So we are expecting to some practical work. Question to Mykola Boyko. I think Mr. Roman and Mr. Andriy can also comment it. Maybe all of you guys three can. What is missing in the legislation of Ukraine related to the managing of construction waste from disruption? What regulatory framework has to be prepared? Let's make it like a blitz reply. Andriy, you are the first. If we are talking about, if one of the speakers, if we talk about the ecological recovery, then it has to be regulated on a legislative level, the start of the process, to regulate it in such a way that this dismantling would already take that into account, and in the future to be sorting during dismantling. Andriy, what would you say? I believe that we are missing a separate standard, because the existing standards for the construction materials and products, they are mostly not fitting to the recycling of construction materials, because the recycled construction materials will be of lower quality, and it will be necessary to have the normative document that really makes it mandatory to use recycled materials, because otherwise nobody will produce them and nobody will use them. Thank you. Roman? It's very difficult for me to say just a very comprehensive question. Let me talk about several. Increase the rent for the extraction of rubble. What else? I would agree about dismantling. This gravel. Also take into account when we do the dismantling, to also take into account the aftermath, because these decisions have to be supported with some. Let me give you an example. Like nearby, with my housing complex where I live, there is a some old garage, like long garage with big windows. Somebody's trying to use it commercially, and they installed good plastic windows and like very old brick. I think it's 70-year-old. And they decided for some reason to paint this bricks and also cover it with some tiles. I mean, look how many materials, how much resources went to make sure that bricks would look like bricks. That doesn't have any sense. You could have just cleaned these bricks, but it's possible to do it, and nothing will be done against you. Let us come to legislative questions. And maybe you can put the value of 1 ton of CO2 at the level of 150 euro. 50 euro for 1 ton of CO2. I mean, if you're simplifying it, then that's why I'm throwing at you some populistic things. For more smart things, we need more time. The next question, I believe, maybe to Irina and to all panelists who can and who want to react. If you want to react, please raise your hand. Volodya, Alexandra, if you want, please switch in. The question is which measures are used to minimize corruption risk in the processes of waste processing? Are there any corruption risks in the waste recycling? Roman is saying no. I'm saying no, but I am not a state official. Maybe it will not be correct for me to comment it. I'm not representing I'm not also representing the law enforcement bodies. But where there is no market, there is no value, there could not be any corruption risks. Alexandra comments that the proposal of Roman is we can grow the income of the state budget using the increased rent. Not that everybody will like it, but still, I think this could be helpful for the budget. I'm moving to the last question. If we're talking about the construction waste and its usage for the reconstruction, if the construction waste is spread on the territory near the front line or decentralized, what do you think about it to centralize this waste in order to recycle them to the on an economically viable basis? Who wants to reply? Who wants to take that question? Roman? This is not a very good proposal from the point of view of the logistics, because the destruction waste during dismantling, they are very heavy. And if you transport them more than, let's say, 30, 50 kilometers, that is not economically reasonable to process it in huge scales. If you want to centralize it, this will look like, as I have seen today in Kiev, huge tractor is bringing snow from point A to point B. It's the same sense. I think it would make sense to move this Japanese equipment from place to place and to make the necessary processing. I apologize. I would add not to move the Japanese waste. We simply have more of such machinery, because we'll have so much of this work. We need to improve this experience, and this is the work with donors. So that's what we said last time about demining. We are missing it. We're actually missing also this type of equipment. This is just another sphere of cooperation with donor. That's where we would need to scale up projects for processing. I would agree to you, Alexandra, but moving machinery is also a good idea. Let me come also to comments in chat. We have some more time until we complete today of our today's event. The question is, do we plan compensation related to the damaged property when we have these Russian assets, and when we have the tribunal in The Hague, then we can apply for this compensation and with a special commission to solve it. But maybe, Alexandra, if you want to add something to this. Yes, I want to add that now you can't get the compensation, but you can send your applications related to destructions. And in Ukraine, we do have some initiatives. Howard Buffett Fund, it can help to collect documents. So the documentation is already taking place. It should, from the advice that I have heard, the more documentation, the more photographs we should collect now. The compensation will be later, as Maria has mentioned, but to document it is very important now. Thank you, Alexandra. The question is from Taras Shemko. I also want to reply to myself, but I will ask Irina Kosa. Did you make an analysis of using building materials and the construction and equipment of the Ukrainian production? What is the share of the categories of such goods? Unfortunately not. We have not done this. And this is something that I have emphasized, that we are missing the statistical data related to the processing of construction waste, because there is really a lot of work ahead of us. This statistical data about usage of any materials in construction, almost nothing is available. Almost nothing you can look up at the recovery portals, what they have used. We have a question from Irina, how to compare tons to this square meters. I would like to ask Anastasia Nahorna, who asked this, that it's really the average value of landfill 90 hryvnia per cubic meters, In my presentation, I wrote how it is measured in Ukraine and the EU. They are measured in hryvnia per cubic meter. In the EU, it's euro per ton. Maybe it's not proper to compare it, but if we look at this maximum 150 hryvnia per square meter, 150 per ton, of course, it's much more cheap in Ukraine to bury this than in the EU. And as Anastasia correctly mentioned, 90 hryvnia per cubic meter is like €2 per ton. Absolutely not 100 or 150 euro like it is in the US. Many thanks, Irina. I can see that there are not that many questions apart from the question about the presentation. So I would like to ask participants in circle, in case you have anything else, just to say some closing remarks. Just to be a little bit more positive, that we don't think that we have some fantastic challenges which are not possible. For the time being, they say that 10, 12 million tons of destruction waste. That's quite a lot. Definitely, that's quite a lot. The ministry is saying it's 700,000 tons, but we understand that there is a certain bias in their evaluation. Nevertheless, such a small country as the Netherlands processes 22 million tons of construction waste. So honestly speaking, in volume, that's nothing. If we learn how to do it, if we create the regulatory mechanisms, that would absolutely to be in line with European green course, green protocols and directives in handling construction waste. So wish you everybody a nice evening. Thank you, Roman. Andriy, maybe the last remark from your side. I would still like to ask a question to Mykola, and I have not heard his reply. What does he mean when he says processing of destruction waste? Only sorting and making it smaller. That's the first stage. The second stage will be the communication with the factory, who can really undertake this to make construction materials. For the time being, they can't do it because we don't have any normative research. Please pay attention that sorting and making it smaller, that's the first stage, and it's important to make the next stage, work with the road construction institutes, how they can use this in the construction of roads, or to work with the workers with the producers of the construction materials, with us, in terms of really forwarding it to the construction materials. Of course, they will be more expensive, they will be worse in quality, but there is no other way. Based on our evaluation, the data that we have encountered, from 90 to 100 million tons. Many thanks, Andriy. It's not possible, to, of course, to check that. Many thanks to all the participants today. Let us finish at a good point. If we learn how to process waste, then we will not have piles of the construction waste from the homes destroyed by Russia, but we will have the garden cities. I would like to wish a nice day. You will be able to find all the presentations on our websites, Big Recovery Portal, our partner organizations, and many thanks to donors who made it possible to have this project. It's the European Union. In order to receive the invitation to the upcoming meetings, come over to CES at org.org.ua and please sign up to all of our events. They are very much different. It's taking place every month. Come over, listen to us, donate to armed forces, and wish you to have a nice evening. Thank you.